Welcome to the Coach Speak podcast, built for coaches, by coaches, hosted by Jamie Bolton and Dustin Martin, sponsored by Ray Crowther, providing athletic training equipment since 1932, helping you dominate with fundamentals.
Hey guys, welcome back to Coach Speak. It's Strength Week and we're on our final episode of the week. And we got two special guests tonight, and they're a part of one of our sponsors for the week, Tsunami Bar Sports. We have Mr. Kim and Mr. Smith today, and they have a lot of insight on what Tsunami Bar is. We'd like to also give another shout out to Team Builder, the #1 strength conditioning software for strength coaches.
Yeah, guys, so we're excited to have both you guys on. If you wouldn't mind, Chad, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then do the same.
Chad Smith. I graduated from Clemson. I've been with Tsunami Bar Sports for a year now, actually. It went by fast. Before I got there, I was a graduate assistant at Clemson, was a assistant with Wes Goodwin for the linebackers there. Did that for about 2 years. And as I kind of backtracking, played ball there from 2015 to 2019. Was privileged to be on some very, very successful teams. During my 5 years there, playing for 4 national championships is pretty freaking insane, especially as I get farther and farther away from playing. It's been 6 years, crazy. It's pretty surreal to see that, the success that we've had there during my time. And then, got into GA and thought I wanted to coach. Coach Sweeney gave me an opportunity. Spent 2 years there, felt the good Lord calling me in a different direction. Got hooked up with David Abernathy with Tsunami Bar Sports and William Strength, and he offered me the opportunity to come run Tsunami Bar with him and kind of for him, as he does other things as well. And so I got hooked up with Tsunami Bar May of 2024, and we've been rocking and rolling. Been with B Young, who's been awesome, helping me kind of just continue to grow and be successful with Tsunami Bar and expanding.
I'm Byung Kim. I've been in the strength industry for about 10 plus years now. I am more on the equipment side and more on the training, programming side of things. I'm kind of an autodidactic person, so I didn't go to school for this. The weirdest part about me and Chad is that Chad is a Clemson Tiger. I'm a Gamecock in the sense of where I graduated. It's funny because I'm the marketing director for both Tsunami Bar and Williams, but by no means did I go to school for that. I went to school for English, and hilariously, they decided to hire kind of like a published writer with, I guess, some critical thinking skills to kind of get the narrative across as far as all that kind of stuff goes. So all I did was I had all the soft skills necessary to kind of go into the marketing side. And so I just kind of learned all the hard skills since, nowadays, as long as you have a computer, there really is no boundaries as far as what you can learn, So, and that's how I started. And I think one thing that Chad didn't mention too is that both he and I are avid trainers. We love lifting, we love training. Chad is more on the athletic side. I'm more on the meathead, powerlifting side. But that's kind of what you want, because now you have both sides kind of developing programming together. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how we work, I guess.
That makes a lot of sense. And guys, we love the Tsunami Bar as a product. I use it every single day. And I really heard about Tsunami Bar at the very beginning with Moose Wallace. He's a legend in York County and really South Carolina and beyond. And he really believed, he was one of those guys back in the 80s and 90s that really, I think, set the standard for strength conditioning and football programs. And he's always been on the cusp and the cutting edge, and I think that's what makes him so successful. And he introduced the Tsunami Bar, and man, when I learned about that, man, we've never looked back. So we're excited to have you guys on. It's an honor to have you guys sponsor this entire week. And the reason we wanted to reach out to you guys for that particular purpose is because we believe in the product, and we believe in not only that, but Chad, me and you met when you came to Kings Mountain, and man, you stayed there for I think hours just talking about the products, talking about how it could benefit our athletes. We were already using the products at the time, and so you made it really, really easy for me to think about implementing even more things, because you guys offer a lot more than just the bar itself. There's so many things that you guys have now, and I can't wait to get into a couple things. So today, guys, we're really, really going to be talking about the origins of Tsunami Bar, kind of how the idea spread through William Strength as well, and then also the science behind it. And then we're going to get into training modalities, equipment specifics, and how we can implement those. So strategies and implementing those in the weight room. So The first segment we're going to be really getting into are the origins. So I'm just going to throw this to either one of you guys that may want to talk about this. But what inspired the creation of the Tsunami Bar?
It was kind of a understanding of like training with pliable bars. I don't think that's anything new. If you go back in time far enough, you'll see people training with like actual, piece of bamboo and things like that. So the concept of like training with a pliable barbell or training with something that is flexible is by no means like a brand new idea. What really started becoming the catalyst to Tsunami Bar being developed was Gordon Brown, who was the main inventor of the actual Tsunami Bar. He basically came to David Abernathy, and I can't recall if this was at Furman or if this was at Clemson.
This was, I believe, at Clemson.
At Clemson, yeah. So at
Yeah.
Clemson, he basically took him a tiny fiberglass rod and basically said, "Hey, this is kind of what I was thinking as far as training goes." And David, looked at that and was like, "That's not gonna do." You know what I mean? Like, this isn't gonna be enough. So Gordon kind of went back to the drawing board with David, and they kind of created this apparatus that was way closer to a traditional barbell. It could be loaded with traditional plates and things like that. So that's kind of how it started. And then the training was kind of instigated in almost a lot of other schools. That's where all the research papers and stuff started coming out, things like that. So that's the start of it all, I would say.
Yeah, and so with for the listener, how does that kind of differ? So you can load the weight just like a barbell, but it's going to flex a lot more than a traditional barbell. And I know we're going to get into some of that, but what's happening to the body, when the body's under that type of load versus a standard barbell, just kind of generally speaking?
Well, if you wanna, I can take that beyond. You can tap into.
Then whatever, you just keep going.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean, if you think about it, like just generalized, I mean, you have a steel barbell. That's a static bar. It's gonna revert. It's not gonna reverberate the energy that you put into. You're gonna move the bar, and the bar's not gonna do anything. You're just moving the bar. Where the Tsunami Bar has fiberglass inside the plastic tube casing, right? And so there's a flat panel that's in there, and there's a circular panel in there. And so as you put on the weights are going at the end of the bar, right? And so once you put the weights on and you put on the collars, you will notice the bar start to bend, right? And then as soon as you start lifting, the moment you get it off the rack, essentially your body's working, because you're going to start to feel like the subtle waves of the bar moving as you step back on a squat or as you lift off on a bench press. You can just feel the subtle waves of the bar bouncing, which is engaging those stabilizer muscles, right? So it's sending your brain is sending waves to all those small muscle fibers to activate, to help control. When I first got on the bar, I didn't train with it at Clemson, which I wish I had. But I remember the very first time before I got on boarded with Tsunami Bar, David Abernathy put me through a little workout, and first one was a bench press. I played linebacker, so my shoulders were kind of, banged up. They weren't very stable, limited range of motion. But when I first lifted it off on the bench, my arms were just like, what is this? Like, and all I was lifting was a speed bar, our Tsunami speed bar, which is loadable up to 50 total pounds. So it was a 25 pound on each side. Bar weighs about 13, 14 pounds, 64 pounds. I benched that every day. But the second I lifted off, I was like, whoa. So my mind right now, when I first did that, it was sending all these different waves through my body, like, whoa, this is not normal. I need to engage our stabilizer muscles, right? And so that's essentially what happens. Is the very first time you lift the Tsunami Bar, regardless of what bar it is, your brain is sending waves to those stabilizer muscles to activate.
Yeah, just to kind of add on to that too, it's basically, rather than just becoming a lightning rod for weight, you kind of allow that to kind of go through you and be a part of it as well. So it's really good for development when it comes to full body, like Olympic movements and things like that, because now you are not fighting the force so much as kind of directing the force, right? That's what that oscillation kind of does. It allows you to basically have higher coordination and neuromuscular connection through that bar, because it is constantly shifting, it is constantly moving. And we'll kind of go into more of like the PT side of it and all that kind of stuff too as we talk. But what Chad said is perfect. Yeah, it basically just it's a very different feeling from a traditional barbell. And that kind of comes with, it being a complete you being a complete apparatus for weight, not just a force to push against weight.
Sure.
Yeah, I can definitely, we use it every single day, and I actually train with it as well. And there's really nothing that I feel like can do the same things the bar can. Like, no matter bands, they don't do the same thing, right? Chains don't do the same thing. But something about the Tsunami Bar and the way that it moves, the way that it's like you can just feel different points of force at different parts of the lift that you just can't feel. Like, let's say on the way down on a squat, the bottom of that squat, this like maximal force at the bottom is just really wild. And then at the top of the squat, it's very strange that, and I love using it, man. I can definitely feel those differences when I use it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jamie mentioned Coach Wallace earlier. So Coach Wallace was the very first strength coach at Legion Collegiate Academy in Rock Hill. And I actually replaced him after 2 years. He retired full time. And when I got there, there were already 10 for each rack. And I was like, man, I got to learn a little bit more about what this Tsunami Bar is. And we fell in love with them. And, I think they're great for upper body, but I love them for lower body. It was one of the most favorite things that we used. And just teaching the kids, man, we're going to go force down as hard as we can, but then you're going to explode up just as hard as you can. And I remember, I'll never forget, a kid came over and was like, Coach, man, I thought 315 was hard. Man, this is a different monster. And I think it's full circle, because when the kids feel the difference and they truly understand that they're getting something out of it, I think that's a total buy-in thing. And I was sold day one, like when I tried them out. So man, I'm excited that we have 10 in our weight room, because I am coaching, but I still am the AD there. So strength program is the number one thing in your athletic program. And the fact that we have the equipment like Tsunami Bar in the weight room is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it from a sports perspective, right? I heard Joey Batson say this from the strength coach at Clemson, say, your weight room is your engine room, right? That's what it is for all your sports teams, regardless football or whatnot. But that's where the work gets done, and that's where your players get prepared to execute out there on the field. And if you're not efficient, and if you're not willing to stretch your players as well as yourself as a coach, because you also get stretched in the weight room too by trying to figure out ways of how to better your players, and it starts there.
Yeah.
And I even think, just, in this day and age, you have multiple teams lifting together. You have boys and girls lifting at the same time. And like, what a great piece of equipment to reach goals of everyone. Like, it's not just this is primarily a football podcast, but it's not just for the football players. Our girls soccer team benefited and loved using them just as much. And I think that's huge. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what do you think the science is behind that neurological piece when you're using it in training with it? Like, what really, with those stabilizer muscles, does it change kind of that neurological piece?
You want me to go? Okay. So
Yeah, go ahead, Bia.
Jamie kind of hit on this earlier, right? Jamie said he brought up bands, he brought up chains and things like that. Almost every single piece that he referred to has like a strength curve. It has a specific difficulty curve that gets easier as you move through, right? So for chains, for example, we know it's easier the more chains are touching contact with ground because the weight is lower. With bands, for example, we know that there is a crescendo of difficulty that goes up as the band goes elastic. And then, of course, at the very top, it tops out. You kind of have a hard time controlling, that kind of thing. The beautiful thing about the Tsunami Bar is that strength curve now, instead of it being just one giant curve, are little tiny crescendos or little tiny reverberations that basically go through specific movements. And just like how you mentioned how you said that it's really good for upper body movement, but you really like it for lower body. What I found is that any movement that has more points of articulation or more points of, I guess, direction change and engagement, that's where the Tsunami Bar really shines. And honestly, I don't think there's anything out there. I mean, there's some technology like things like the Vertimax pad and things like that that are sort of kind of engaging in that way. But right now, there is no technology out there that I guess prioritizes angle of deflection. And then, of course, the control that comes with that deflection, right?
Yeah. The
That
bar.
makes sense. Also, why we really love like load power push press with it, because there's multiple parts to it. That was a really good one that we like too.
Yeah. Like we see it a lot in like cleans, right? Cleans, it's not necessarily perfect for cleans in the sense of, there's obviously a couple limitations with the thickness and things like that. However, we find that if you're able to do a clean with that Tsunami bar, that S hoop that you kind of get, you can really see that get perfected. And I can't really, and again, keep in mind, Chad and I aren't necessarily people with like masters in kinesiology or anything like that, but you can just kind of see that development happening. And they just get better and better, and their form kind of purifies over time with that. And of course, the beauty of it is that I don't think any other tech does this quite as responsively. You can see where their hitching points are, and then you can kind of work through that hitching point because the deceleration will kind of kick in where their hitching point is, right? So, I mean, that's one way. I don't know if that answered your question outright, but
Oh, 100%. No,
yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Bolton, you got anything on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm ready to kind of talk about how it could really help with, football or really training in general. So yeah, let's move on to segment 2 and talk about like training modalities. Because I think we kind of have the science piece, and you don't have to know every little detail of angle of deflection, all that. Like the big thing is if you feel it, you know something's different and how it can impact your athletes. And so I really want to get into kind of the weeds on how we can use it for like football training or just strength and training in general. So what are some key lifts or movements that you recommend to, let's say, football players? And it may not just be football players, it could be whatever, but our audience is primarily football coaches. What key movements do you recommend?
Well, me being the football player, there's a couple movements that I know, having trained with the bar now. And again, granted, I don't play football anymore, but I still train with it. And it's one of those things that I wish I had trained with when I was an athlete and I was playing, because I believe it is a bar that directly trains athleticism because of what it does and because of what we talked about, right? So I'm a big believer in using the bar just the same way you use a standard steel barbell, and like the squat and the bench, the power cleans. There's just different variations in which you can train in terms of different tempos of the bar, right? You can move depending on the bar that you do have, and I'm talking with the speed bar right now. You can move extremely explosive and sudden. You can move extremely rapid pace, fire. You can do deceleration work, which, as coaches and as athletes, and the coaches that have played football know, and even the coaches that coach football, they know that there's deceleration that is happening out there on the field, right? And so I like training with the bar, where it's on my back and I do quarter squats, right? I get to jump depth and I snap down, right? And I deceleration, I hold that bar right there, right? I also like getting the bar on my back, getting a good linebacker stance. I played linebacker, getting a good linebacker stance, getting that bar moving, getting it oscillating, getting it bending, right? And the bar that I'm referring to right now is the speed bar, right? And then I like using shuffle, doing a shuffle walk with it as it's bending, right? And again, the intensity of that bar deflecting is what you want to coach. You want your athlete to move that bar fast. You want to hear a snap. You want to hear a clack. When you're hearing a clack, it's kind of that. Um, it's essentially the or essentially it's a signifier that the bar is hitting optimal speed, right? I like using it as jammer presses, right? You can look at on our website and go to our movement library, and you can see some jammer presses movements that will require you to get some straps, right, that look like TRX straps, right? And you can, again, coach exploding through the hips, right? They're great for every position, right? Because every position at some point in time, you got to explode through your hips, right? Come off the ball as D linemen, as linebackers, exploding through the tackle, running backs, freaking getting through the hole. And so on and so forth. Clemson uses it. I know the strength coach for their offensive lineman uses it for pass sets, the push-pull effect. So your offensive lineman, you can use that, again, as a pre-activation for practice. Use a speed bar, put 25 pounds, get a couple pass sets in, get their CNS fired up, get good blood flow going, and go out there and crush it with your pass sets out there for practice. So those are just a couple lists of movements that you could do.
Yeah, and we actually use the jammers in our weight room, the jammer series. We have like a whole series of movements. And really, what if you
Mhm.
don't know what those are, coaches, it's really like 2 point and 4 point extension with the tsunami bar. And so we put them on the whistle, and man, you can hear, the clack, clack, clack. Like
Mhm.
it is a violent, um, explosive movement that uses like the entire body. And you don't get that movement without the tsunami bar, in my opinion.
Nope.
Yeah, for sure. Just to kind of add on to what Chad was saying too, it's really good for drilling like triple extension as well. Just because you can physically see the liftoff that's a little bit different. Because again, if you're doing it properly, that angle of deflection is going to basically bend down and then just swoop up, and it's going to go much harder if you have that perfect triple extension. So you can at least articulate more with like an explosive thrust, right? And then of course anything that's sports specific that might be too dangerous for a steel barbell, Tsunami Bar is perfect for that. There is really no alternative. So, just to kind of go into it a little bit more, but like what Chad was saying, jump squats, a lot of the times when you actually have an athlete do jump squats, they won't jump as hard as they can, right? Because they know subconsciously that there's going to be pain involved with that when it loads back onto that T spine. It really doesn't matter how much weight it is. But the Tsunami Bar not only aids within a specific part of that jump, but it basically, pushes down right at the point of that direction change. So it doesn't hurt as much because, again, it's draped completely across the back. So sports specific movements like that, those are the ones where the Tsunami Bar really shines because there is no alternative.
Yeah, you can't get it. And even thinking about like training in and out of season too, like I think about just with that force like on your shoulders, like as a linebacker, Chad. Like I'm thinking like that straight bar at some point over time may start to wear and tear on the shoulder or the bicep tendon. Whereas the tsunami bar, one, you feel like you can go a little bit deeper and get a better
Mhm.
stretch, but it's not feeling as if it's malleable to a degree.
Yeah.
It feels like it may be better, like maybe in season if you're gonna because your volume is gonna be so much higher in
Yeah.
practice that the
Mhm.
snide bar is that something that you would suggest?
I would definitely suggest in-season training for sure. Again, I train with it all year round, but particularly for your team that's playing particularly late in the season, you're playing in November, right? Those region finals, state semifinals, state championship, those teams that are consistently in that realm, I would definitely taper off the steel barbell and lean more towards training with Tsunami. And the reason why is because of kind of what you said, Jamie, is that those break points in a lift, those bench, those squats, because you still want to go through those core lifts, right? They'll beat you down with steel. They'll wear and tear you. The minute you get underneath a steel barbell and you load it up with 315, spinal compression happening, guaranteed every time, right? And that's going to beat you down, right? And the thing is, B. Young mentioned it, is that because the tsunami bars, the weights are at the end and the bars draped across your back, the weight distribution is not on your spine; it's through your whole trunk. And because of the oscillation and the waves, hence the tsunami, right? The waves of contraction that's happening throughout your whole body as you lift the bar off the rack, your body's recruiting more muscles, right? And it's recruiting those stabilizer muscles. So the work is not always on those prime movers, right? It's also on those supportive connective tissues that are assisting those prime movers, right? Which is, as you get in later in the season, you can kind of taper off, right, with your load, right? But you still want to lift fast, heavy, right? That's why I recommend the force bar too, so you can load it up a little bit and still get some strength based training and still be strong. But also the speed bar allows you to mix it up and still be dynamic and fast without beating yourself down, right? And it also is a time saver at the same time because you don't have to worry about changing the weights because it's all
Mhm.
relative. All four of us can lift out of the same rack and we can have all four different strength levels, but it's all relative. What you put into the bar is what's going to reverberate back to you, right? And we talk about football like you're playing against a man across you, right? He's not about to just get out the way and move, right? You got to move him, right? And the second you come off the ball and you hit him in the mouth, you're going to feel that energy right back, right?
Mhm.
Same thing with the bar, right? So it continues to train your whole CNS system to react to, getting hit in the mouth while you're training in the weight room, right? But you're doing it in a way where it's not beating you down at the same time.
Yeah, and that in-season piece, that you're talking about, because like back when I was a strength coach, in season, we would try to stay a little bit away from cleans. We do more speed deadlifts or high pulls for less focus on the wrist to make sure we kept our wrist healthy. And like this is hitting really exactly what you're saying, like less stress on the body. We're not going to sacrifice, potential injuries to our wrist because of what the bar offers. Yeah, that's a big pain point that I think coaches need to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we see it a lot in our like competitive world because we have a lot of barbell competitors that use a strongman, things like that. But their specific workload is too high to just hit with steel constantly because, again, the fatigue that would be accrued within the tendons and things like that are just too much. So a lot of the times they'll use the tsunami bar as like a variance lift to kind of get the same amount of weight. To get the same amount of load and distribution of weight that they need to train under, I guess the same level of intensity is what I'm saying, but without any of the tendon carryover, the damage carryover, things like that. So,
no, that makes sense, and this kind of leads into my next question that I think is right where we need to be with this. How does the Tsunami Bar enhance speed and agility? But like talk about how it still provides like strength gains and those things, but it also the speed and agility part of it.
it's I'll approach it first from a fluid perspective, right? So any type of weight movement that you do, whether it's manipulation of another person or explosion, it's always going to be more fluid weight, right? It's never going to be like a static weight load. So the speed transfer kind of happens because now you're training with something that's much more similar to the actual movement that you're going to do on the field versus just what we call like training. So that's kind of what we mean when we say sports specific, right? We're talking about, because again, you guys know this as coaches, I'm sure, but there's a lot of people in the higher level worlds where they become a stud in the weight room, but that doesn't necessarily transfer over to the actual field, right? And I feel like the reasoning why is because the systems that they're using to train is specific for training before it's specific for their actual sport. The tsunami bar disintegrates that wall in between what I'm going to do on the field versus what I do for training. So now everything that you're doing in terms of training actually has an application for the field. I think that's kind of why Tsunami Bar aids in things like speed development and things like that. Chad, I'd let you go on in this a little bit more because you have
Yeah.
more experience in it because you've actually used it for this protocol.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, my playing days are past me, right? But I still train. I like to train as if I'm still playing, and from a lifting perspective, right? I'm not out there on the field doing agility drills. I hung those cleats up, but particularly from a speed and explosive standpoint, right? I still want to be explosive. I still want to be athletic, right? And so we talk about speed and how we can train speed and athleticism in a weight room, right? I think the Tsunami Speed Bar is in its name how you're going to help train it from a lifting perspective, right? When you're not out on the field doing, speed drills, right? Because the bar is very light in terms of it being 13 pounds. All of our bars are light, but our lightest bar is about 13 pounds right here with the speed bar. And you can just load it up with 10 pounds and you can get a kick-ass workout with it. And the name of the game is moving that bar extremely fast, right? So for me, when I lifted with a lot of steel at Clemson, granted Joey Batson had a way of doing things and he was very successful, but for me particularly, I came in as a very athletic linebacker. I was 213, 215, right? I ran a short shuttle under 4 seconds. I had a 40 plus inch vertical. I had about a 4.640. I was 6'4", 213. I was pretty damn explosive. But I started lifting a lot of steel, and I didn't lift it as fast as I should have. Right? I was slow and I was rigid when I was lifting with steel, and I kept on doing that, and I packed on a lot of muscle though. I was definitely a bigger linebacker, but my movement out there on the field was slow and rigid because that's what I was training. That steel barbell's not going to reverberate the energy that you put into it, right? Where a speed bar, if you're moving fast and explosive, you're training fast and explosive, right? If you train fast and explosive, it's going to go out and translate out there on the field. You can train fast and explosive with a steel barbell, but it's going to beat you down. You try doing jump squats with a steel barbell, right? You try doing scissor jumps with a steel barbell and see how that feels on your athletes and your kids. It's going to beat them down. But this,
to
go
kind of
ahead,
add on
Dion.
to that, one thing I did want to mention too is that like I think the reason why in the actual description that you guys are wanting is it trains for release work, right? So speed and almost all explosive base energy production has a release point where inertia carries over, and then that is what technically carries you over, right? Performance isn't. So for example, I always use this as my main example. We should be training our bodies like we are like a whip, not a lead pipe, right? We train with steel so mechanically. So, because again, if we were mechanical, then we would be able to operate like a crane does, a hydraulic crane. A hydraulic crane is as powerful at this point as it is at this point. As this point, there is a logical I guess there's a logical diminishing return of how much force they can produce as the arm expands up. But the human body is not like that. The human body is more like a recurve bow, right? You pull back and then you let go, and then you let that snap then carry over for actual explosive production. The speed bar and the Tsunami Bar tech translates so much better to that than any other piece of technology we have. The only thing that really comes close is things like fluid weight, like water weight stuff and things like that sort of have that carryover. But if you want to actually train the full movement throughout with that understanding that articulation is actually what produces speed and explosive energy, not just strength, mechanical strength alone, that's, I think, why the Tsunami Bar is so beneficial.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's the explosive part of the body. So like whether you're throwing a baseball, whether you're hitting it, I think about like hitting a baseball, like you're coiling up and you're letting it rip, right? That's the same feeling I think happens when you're talking about that recurve effect with that versus just doing like heavy rotations with like a plate. You know what I mean? That would be something completely different. And I think that's where you're seeing the translation from performance in the weight room go on to the field, plus other benefits too with like your soft tissue stuff.
Yeah, to go back into that example of the baseball bat, right? Like if baseball worked the way that we train, that would mean that if you swing it as hard as you can, that would translate to a harder ball that struck, right? But that's not true. That's you give a baseball bat to anybody who's never trained baseball, they're going to swing that bat as hard as they can, but none of that energy transference is going to actually amount to much, right? It's being able to produce enough torque and then having a release to then let it kind of control itself to then hit, right? And I think that's one thing that the Tsunami Bar really does a good job at. Like that's why a jump squat with the steel base bar is really just a mechanical it's just a taxing of the mechanics of a jump. While the jump squat with a Tsunami Bar is drilling exactly when that release point is, coiling up as much energy as you possibly can, and then letting that carryover happen and just letting your body guide in the direction of the actual explosion. Right.
Yeah, it seems like it's an efficiency thing as much as anything.
Yeah, you keep talking like that, you're gonna have golf coaches sold. I know I'll start training on it for my golf swing.
Tsunami Golf Club.
No doubt.
The mini stick right there. That's your tool right there.
Just go the Coach Speak the mini stick by Coach Speak. We'll put our little branding on it. We'll collaborate.
So the last school that I was at, and Jamie was also there, I'd say they did a really, really great job with the collaboration with the athletic trainers and return to play protocols for those that were injured or coming back from an injury. How would you say the Tsunami Bar can aid in maybe physical therapy or any kind of return to play protocols do you see it helping heal quicker or some other things? Tell us about how you think the Tsunami Bar helps with return to play.
I think it's just another tool in the toolbox in terms of the different, applications of an athlete going through protocols to get them back on the field. I've worked particularly with a PT in Easley, South Carolina, with the movement doctors, Dr. Elliot Cleveland. And he's a big Tsunami Bar fan. I definitely look up on Instagram the movement doctors, and you will see him go through a variety of protocols, but he will talk about the Tsunami Bar and why they use it there at their facility, and the reason why they use it there at the facility that he has. And he trains a lot of, or he helps the rehab process for a lot of Clemson athletes. And the reason why he uses it in his protocols is because of the fact of the motor recruitment of the smaller tendons and ligaments and strengthening those areas. You look at the injuries to your big prime movers, there was typically somewhere in the chain link a weak chain. And more than likely it was one of those connective tissues that was the weak link, right? And it wasn't getting as much stimulus in your training protocols that as coaches and as athletes that we go through on a day-to-day basis to prepare ourselves to be the best athlete that we can be. And so the Tsunami Bar, what it does is it activates those chain links, right, and strengthens them. And when you do have an athlete that is injured, right, the bar has the capability of being lightly loaded and you still get effective work. And it doesn't take that much to get activation with the Tsunami Bar. You can load, like I mentioned, a speed bar up to 10 pounds. And that's 34 pounds. That's lighter than your steel barbell, right? And you can do regular bench press after a torn labrum. I had a coach in Georgia who didn't really know much about Tsunami Bar and recently got a weight room done by William Strength and got some Tsunami Bars. And he reached out to me and was like, hey, I don't really know how to train with them. And I was just like, hey, just start with your standard steel barbell lifts. I went to visit a few weeks later, and he was a fanatic about the bars. And he brought up an athlete to me and asked him and made the athlete tell me what happened to his shoulder a couple weeks ago. I said, I tore my labrum. And I was like, man, that sucks, dude. You tore your labrum? That's horrible. He's like, hey, guess what I was able to do with the Tsunami Bar? I was like, what? And he's like, I was able to bench with it. And I'm like, benching with a Tsunami Bar or benching on a torn labrum is typically not recommended 2 weeks after. But because of the break points in a bench, right, and the muscle activation in a Tsunami Bar, because of its deflection, its oscillatory movement, it activates those connective tissues. So the break point of where the soft tissue injury is not being overwhelmed because all of those supportive connective tissues are being activated to help it and support it. So it's not all weight bearing on that area.
Yeah.
So there's other protocols. I mean, the bar, we have multi-sticks, and again, that will be a rabbit hole we could go down to, and we talk for, a lot longer.
Well, I remember in high school, I tore my shoulder, had to have it reconstructed. And the number one thing they made me use was a body blade. And
Yeah.
it is very similar in a way to the Tsunami Bar. It has a grip in the middle, and the sides do similar ways as the Tsunami
Yes.
Bar. And that's why I was interested about that part. How could you use it in a return to play protocol to try to heal up?
There's different movements that you could. So you use the body blade as an example. So we have a multi-stick, right? It's very similar to the body blade, and except that it works on 3 planes, not just 1 plane. The body plate goes up and down. The multi-stick, not only does it go up and down, but it also oscillates. So again, it's that muscle stimulation that's happening, right, to activate those smaller muscle fibers. So there's a variety of different protocols that you could go through for shoulder injury, just kind of the demonstration that you just did. And it doesn't take a lot of movement, right? Because you're coming off of an injury.
And something that comes to my mind too, I coach quarterbacks and I have a baseball background too. It's like when you think about return to play protocol, really, it's really, really good for preemptive, protocols too. Like use your mini sticks, if it's a part of your programming, you're probably going to have less of these issues to deal with, which is really great for your athletes. There's just nothing else in my mind that can really do it, especially, there's even on y'all's website, you have a lot of different ways to use these things. Like you can see all the lifts and all that stuff too. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Again, kind of going back to that, the preemptive side. We know for a fact that the majority of injuries in a lot of sports has come from like direction change, right? It comes from direction change when your body is not in a mechanically advantageous position. This kind of eliminates that process because training with it is basically exposing yourself to chaos to a certain degree. So you're putting yourself in a position where there is no such thing as mechanically disadvantageous, right? We know that like the majority of injuries when it comes to a squat based movement is right as you come out of the hole before that full knee extension happens. Bench, same thing. One of the best things that Chad kind of touched on was because of the oscillation and the slight movement that the bar always has, it's always in a state of flux. So you're never exposed to shear force when that specific moment. that little slight bit of movement, although it is crazy because when I explain this to people who've never touched it, it seems so or like it doesn't seem like that would make sense. Something that moves seems like it's much more risky. It seems like it would be much more dangerous. But in actuality, something that's in a state of flux is so much safer on those mechanically disadvantageous positions. At least that's what we found. That's why so many people, I mean, I had a guy who literally had a completely torn Achilles replacement and then a knee replacement, and he still squats 500 plus on a Tsunami bar every week with one of our coaches. And I just don't think that would have been possible if he didn't use the Tsunami bar for his rehabilitation protocol, right?
It seems like the more muscles that are recruited end up protecting the athlete than just isolating on like one particular muscle or one particular, spot. So that's interesting.
Yeah, at some point in a movement, right, there is a point where one part of the muscle is super overloaded and none of the other parts are.
Right.
That's going to happen. One area is going to get red hot while every other area is going to be ice cold, right? Tsunami bar, instead of one area being red hot and everywhere being ice cold, it's lukewarm all around. And I think that's one of the reasons why, injury prevention, using it for injury prevention is so useful.
So let's talk a little bit about the different types of bars that you guys offer. So you have a speed bar, we have speed bars, and we have force bars. Explain those, and then also what are the other things that you guys have?
So we have our speed bar, which is loadable up to 50 total pounds. You load 25s on each side, and that's kind of your max capacity there. I like lifting it between that range. 10 to 25 is a great range there. Force bars up to 315, and then you have your max bar, which hold Byung. Can you correct me if I'm wrong?
Plates.
Can hold 6 plates. Yeah,
6 plates on each side. Yeah.
So that's the 3 barbells that we sell. We also have our SG line, which stands for our standard grip barbell line. Our SG20 holds up to 20 pounds, SG50, and our SG90. I like our SG50 as a strictly plyometric bar, and can also be used as a training bar for your female athletes and just really for your athletes in general. And again, you can look on our website and go to our training library of all the ways of which I implement some of these bars in terms of the movements. And again, it's just me, and I work collaboratively with Byung to kind of come up with these movements. And again, it's just all the movements that I can think of, and I'm hoping that what it does is it helps stimulate the creativity, and some of the strength coaches be like, I didn't see this movement. What if we test this out? Oh, okay. I like that. And so we're also continuing to add to it and evolve it. It's a living, breathing library. And so those are our 3 lines there, or our barbell line, kind of your Speed Force Max, your SG20, SG50, SG90. Then we have our multi sticks, and they're like the body blade, but they're the body blade on some serious steroids. And they have half-pound weights that look like rubber balls that are connected to the ends of it, and it works and operates similarly to a body blade. But just like the Tsunami bar, again, it reverberates the energy that you put into it. And so those are great products and great tools for all sports in terms of, your quarterbacks, for your multi sticks, a warm up activation, right? Your quarterbacks are using bands, and they're grabbing tennis balls and doing this motion. They're just doing arm circles. They're doing everything they can to get pump blood flow in there before they go throw. Well, you use a multi-stick and you go through different movements with the bar, right? And it's like a fire hydrant of blood flow because of the muscle recruitment that's happening. So you can think of any of the sports that require their arms moving in any kind of explosive fashion, and the multi-sticks are great tools for that. So that's our prime lineup for our products that we push, really is really our speed bars, our multi sticks, and then we have a couple specialty items as well that are good for rehab protocols, and some are maybe a little bit more specified for certain sports more so than others.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing about just kind of comparing it to the body blade a little bit. Another aspect of the multi-stick that makes it really good is that the soft weights on the ends can be moved inward to increase the stiffness of the bar. So now you can kind of linearly progress with that bar, right? For your more gifted athletes, they can move that way closer in and then move it closer and closer every couple training sessions. or you can move it out depending on if you want to use it for like rehab work and things like that. So that's another little additional thing that makes it a little bit more of a better value than your traditional body blade style piece of
Yeah.
equipment.
Hmm.
Yeah, so when you guys, I guess, Williams Strength, you guys fit out these weight rooms. What do you think are like the first couple of those products? Which line do you suggest if you're gonna your first Tsunami Bar purchase? You're a strength coach that's not only gonna train football guys, but maybe multiple athletes. What line would you go with? I mean, or are there multiple?
I would say speed bar first and foremost, then multi sticks, and then some type of jammer based system for those.
Okay,
That's always the best way to start because now you're kind of exposing yourself to the full catalog. Because the methodologies are going to stay the same. The
right.
only thing that changes is the linear progression of it, right? So as kids get better, as kids get stronger, they can move to the force bar, and then of course you can have one or two max bars for max out events for morale stuff, things like that. But genuinely speaking, as far as Tsunami Breakdown goes, 90% of it is always going to be speed bars and multi sticks first, and then everything else second.
Right. And, we still train with steel bars. One thing that we think about doing in our programming, and you guys can help me with this too, like we still keep our core lifts, throughout. So we're still, traditional. And, we were talking to strength coaches earlier this week, and, they don't necessarily think the same way I do, but we're still going to do a bench. We're still going to do a back squat. We're going to do a power clean, and we're going to do a push jerk with steel. And what I've started to do is try to, use your quote unquote auxiliaries with the Tsunami Bar. So like if we're doing like a unilateral lower body movement, we're doing like Tsunami Bar split squats, or we're doing if it's a bilateral deal, we're doing like Tsunami Bar front squats. We're doing incline bench press with Tsunami Bar. We're doing overhead, we're doing, push jerks with the Tsunami Bar. Like we're doing a lot of those things. Is that something that you would recommend as a protocol, or do you just replace all the steel and work Tsunami?
I'm a big believer in that it's just another tool in the toolbox. I'm a meathead too now. I can totally be a full on meathead now. I don't have to worry about being super athletic out there on the field. I still like to train athletically and explosive with the Tsunami Bar. And that's where I kind of cycle it in, right? So I still like to lift with steel. I still like to get, strong. I still like to strain with steel barbell. Um, and I don't think I will ever go away with that. I think there is, you could technically go all Tsunami Bar there. We probably couldn't go wrong with that either. Again, there's no right or wrong way with how you want to train a Tsunami Bar. The bottom line is you just got to train with it, right? You got to just implement it somehow. And for coaches that are new to it or relatively foreign, or have always thought about, man, like I kind of want to try it, but I don't know where to start. I mean, just take your standard steel lifts, right? And just change one up with a Tsunami Bar, right? And start there. What I will say is, when you just start out, your athletes are going to look awkward. You will take your most athletic athlete and have him do, a bench press and tell him to move that bar extremely fast. And you take a speed bar, you load it up with 10 pounds, get your most powerful athlete doing a bench press. You will start to see them almost fly off that bench, right? And he will be like, what the hell what is this? And you're going to shock their whole CNS system. That's going to go haywire. They're going to be like, what is this? And so you're exposing them to different elements of stimulation at a young age, and how you implement it in terms of the movements that you do, in terms of how you program it. You really can't go wrong. It's just starting somewhere. And then from there, the more you start to train with it, the more you start to familiarize with it. And again, if you follow our Instagram page at Tsunami Bar Sports, you go to tsunamibarsports.com, you look at the library, there's a little bit of a breakdown. We're continuing to evolve our website as we continue to grow. There's going to be more and more information on there in terms of ways to implement the bar itself.
Just to kind of add on to what he was saying, I don't necessarily believe in any type of like one true modality anyway. So I don't believe like there is like a replace everything with this kind of thing. I think it's all just you add that as a part of your variance work. So how I would use a Tsunami Bar is I would start adding it into different variance lifts that aren't my main lifts, and then I would start replacing them with Tsunami slowly and go that way. I will say, however, the one thing that that I have seen anecdotally where the Tsunami Bar is really, really good at in terms of like this being the main true training modality, super young people, especially like kids who are right around that speed window, girls and boys that are right around that speed window, there is such a more, it's funny because again, this is just a little bit of weird history here, but one of the first things I did when I first started training, I converted tapes from like Soviet Russian training in like Russia way back in the day. And one of the coolest things that they did was, because everybody was the exact same size, because everybody was the exact same measurements, they did all plyometrics until they hit about 18. Then that's when they started exposing themselves with steel, right? They exposed themselves to steel super late because by that point they're specialized to be able to handle it. I think one of the biggest problems that we have within our industry is that sometimes we specialize with steel too early. And so that becomes the only training modality that they use. So anecdotally, and again, keep in mind, there's no research papers or anything like that yet, but there are a couple kids that I know of that trained with Tsunami first before any type of steel-based training. And almost every single one of them are just so much more athletically gifted and dominant now that they are closer to being adults. A lot of the four kids that I can think of off the top of my head are now all in high school era. And they're just playmakers within that specific field, you know.
So it sounds like middle schools need to invest in some Tsunami bars, the feeder programs. Like that would be,
I like that.
that would be huge.
We actually have a school, God bless, I can't remember it. Escaping me off the top of my head. It's in Georgia, and they recently got a weight room done by William Strength. And I'm kicking myself. I can't remember the school, but I know the strength coach there, and he trains their young athletes with Tsunami Bar. And again,
Makes a lot of sense.
yeah, there's that speed window, and that speed window for those fast twitch muscle fibers, is short and small, and so you want to maximize that window, and you want to train explosive and fast in that window in which those fast twitch muscle fibers are developing. And a lot of people get the misconception sometimes that Tsunami Bar is only for experts, right? It's only for high level elite lifters, experienced lifters. I disagree personally, because again, I think it's a bar that is safe enough for those inexperienced lifters, right? And get them acclimated to stabilization, how to activate their stabilizers muscles, right? That's what the bar trains. It trains the mind to contract those stabilizer muscles. And I think the best way that I can explain it is a bench press, right? You're supposed to activate your lats. Like for me, it took me a long time to activate my lats, and I'm an experienced lifter. I've been lifting for over 15 years, right? And I played football at a high level. When I started training with the Tsunami Bar, which was a year plus ago, that's when I really started to contract my lats. Like I was kind of off and on. I was hit or miss with contracting my lats, but the Tsunami Bar really trained me how to really contract my lats and use my lats on a bench press, right? So I can only imagine if I learned that at 13, 12 years old, like how much of a stronger athlete that I could have been, or a more dynamic athlete that I could have been potentially. And again, that's just that's a basic lift. You can use it again in different dynamic movements, and you use it as different dynamic movements at a young age. You're helping those athletes maximize their window to be dynamic and athletic.
Yeah.
So
And
as we kind of, go ahead, Coach.
Well, I know in my time in the weight room, I was a tier system guy. So the main way that I incorporated Tsunami Bar right out the gate was in the middle tier. Max strength, I would still use steel. And then as soon as we hit tier 2 for that speed and power phase, it was Tsunami Bar. Everything we did was Tsunami Bar in that tier. And like you said, there's no right or wrong way to do it, but I think coaches listening, that's the way I first found to implement it. And then I would try different things and new ideas in my time. But I think football coaches and coaches in general are really open to listening about things, but they're very quick to close things off that they don't know a lot about, which is why I was excited to do this episode, because I think we have a lot of great listeners, some who I know use Tsunami Bars, but some who maybe haven't. And maybe this is enough. So my kind of question would be, what's one message that any coach listening to this can walk away with that you think they should know about Tsunami Bar? And like not a sales pitch, but like the true coach, you need to hear us out on this part and how it can benefit you.
Well, here's what I say. I mean, I'm an athlete, right? And y'all are coaches. You guys probably played the game growing up, right? And I hear coaches talk all the time about, hey, push yourself as an athlete. You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? You got to get in that zone. You got to get where it's going to test you. It's going to stretch you, right? Where there's people that it's gonna grow you. It's gonna either chew you up, spit you out, or you're gonna get up and you're gonna learn from it. You're gonna grow, right? So coaches, you preach that message to your athletes, right? But a lot of coaches, to your point, they say that they're open minded to growing and learning, but all of a sudden they get into a point where, I don't really know much about this, so never mind. I'm just going to stick to what I know, right? So it's like, wait a second, coach. Like, you're just telling your athletes to get uncomfortable and be comfortable being uncomfortable and grow. So you're speaking out of both sides of your mouth. So like from a Tsunami Bar perspective, like again, I understand that there's some elements to it for the coaches that are, they see it and they don't have that much understanding about it, but some things just make sense. You know, I like Byung said, I don't have a background in kinesiology. I don't know the breakdowns and the in-depths of the muscles and the neuromuscular connections and all that. I don't know. Like, I don't, but I'm an athlete, right? I played ball. I was at a pretty high level, and I went through a couple good programs, right? And so I know what makes sense. And when I got my hands on the bar and I started lifting it, and I was like, light bulb. I was like, dang, where was this when I was an athlete? And I think you mentioned, coach, that some of your kids that you coach, when they got underneath the bar and you were doing squats with it, Coach Martin, like you had some kids come to you and say, like, Coach, this was nuts. This is insane. It's heavier than 315. Like, the kids that I have gone to, so I've gone throughout all of Georgia and some of South Carolina, North Carolina, and just, trying to spread the good news of the good Lord and Tsunami Bar. And I've gotten the bar in coach's hands, and some of the kids, they use it, they like it, and they're like, Coach, we got to get this. And some of the coaches, they're like, I don't know, I mean, because it's uncomfortable, because they don't know. How are they going to train with it? How are they going to program with it? Like, where do I start? Like, all these different things. Like, I also got a game plan and get ready for practice, and now I got to learn how to implement a Tsunami Bar. Well, like, you don't have to overwhelm yourself with trying to be perfect with it, right? You just got to start and just learn to be uncomfortable to start. But once you start and you give it a chance and you invest, because it will require an investment, but I promise you it'll pay off, because your athletes are going to get better. They are going to get better. I got better just now. Like, since training with it, I feel like I've been more explosive. My range of motion, I've been more stable. It's like, dang, like, where was this when I was in my prime? Like, who knows? Maybe I could have had a chance at going to the league being a little bit more explosive. Instead of running like a high 4.7s, I may have ran like a low 4.7. I don't know, but that would be my message to these coaches is, you preach about to your players being comfortable being uncomfortable. Well, Tsunami Bar is a tool that's going to make you uncomfortable, but it's going to make you better. I promise that.
Well said.
Yeah, my message would be sort of similar. I would say the difference between a good coach and a great coach is that a great coach is willing to admit that they are a lifetime student or a lifetime pupil of the sport, right? Almost every single coach. I mean, what's wild is that, again, you would think that this is anytime we do a clinic, right? We always ask the question, or somebody always ends up asking the question, if these kids' maxes aren't getting higher, how do you know for a fact that these kids are not getting better? And of course, we always retort with the idea of, well, just because a kid's maxes go up doesn't mean that their athletic performance does, right? And that in itself is such a groundbreaking message for them, because a lot of the times no one ever really told them that these linear metrics don't really amount to much if you don't have a wide enough understanding or wide enough experience base to actually calculate for that, right? So I would say that my messaging would be something along the lines of, don't be afraid to be a lifelong pupil. It's better to not know and to learn than to think that you have a grasp on everything and fail your students, because ultimately, like Chad mentioned, a good coach is really like a good father, right? Or a good parent. And no parent really has all the answers immediately out the gate, right? They have to learn and they have to kind of experience to be able to do that. And you have to kind of react. You're more reacting than you are dictating, right? I think being confident enough to be able to admit that, you know, I'm wrong, or these things that work have value. That's all we're really looking for, right? We just want somebody to be open enough to at least maybe give us enough ground to say, hey, maybe this does work, right? Maybe I should try it. A maybe is all we're asking for. We're not asking for a definitive, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think having that growth mindset. We had a strength coach, Mark Hoover, on this week, and he told me, a long time ago, man, that you always need to have a growth mindset. And he didn't even start out as a strength coach. He was like a wing T football coach, and that guy's career is like a direct correlation to his growth mindset and what he's been able to learn and lose the ego. And I think that's why we've resonated with our audience, because I think our listeners have that mindset too. They're always trying to gain like nuggets of information. That's why we have speakers on all the time, not because we know everything, just because we're trying to learn from people. We want to try to steal these nuggets, and so I think it's a valuable lesson. Dustin's over here taking notes. He just showed me all the notes.
got my
Can't
notes,
read them.
man.
You can't
No.
read that handwriting, dude.
I
You got to
but,
transcribe that.
all the coaches I've worked for, the ones that were more open-minded were the ones that made it the experience that much better. And I think that's an important part. All assistant coaches listening, don't be scared to be that guy to go to your head coach and say, man, I was listening to the podcast, this Tsunami Bar thing. I really think we need to look into it, because me and Jamie both work for a guy, Bobby Carroll. He's pretty well known throughout South Carolina and North Carolina. He was the most open-minded coach we ever worked for. Like, we could have walked up to him tomorrow after listening to this episode and say, hey, man, there's Tsunami Bars. We need to get them. He said, "Hey man,
get them, man.
hey man, get me a quote. Get me a quote." And it's like, but like that. That's how he is. And you know what? We probably learned the most ever working under him, because he allowed that open mindedness and feedback. Hey, what do y'all want in the practice schedule? What do y'all need? He was really good at that. But
And one more thing, I'm just going to try to piggyback off this mindset. Well, like, if no one in your area has it as a coach, man, you get it in your weight room and then you post it, and that's automatically gonna put you on the map of like trying to be the most innovative and cutting edge in all aspects of your program, especially if that's something that you believe in. But it's not just about posting it, man. Like, this stuff really works, and it'll always be also something like, if you guys want to see it in action, come watch us at Rock Hill. We'll have them, or we have them currently. Come watch us use them. And I know Kings Mountain's got them too, and they do a really, really good job over there of using those and implementing those. They have both the speed and the force bars, I believe. So, just go watch them.
Mm-hmm. Or reach out to me.
Sure.
Shoot a DM. Follow us on Tsunami Bar Sports on Instagram. We're also on X. And just DM, be like, hey, we're interested in a demo. Depending on your location, I live in South Carolina, so if you live out in Oklahoma or something like that, you're just gonna have to take our word for it and watch the Instagram videos with testimonials. But if you're like in the North Carolina, Georgia area, Tennessee, just feel free to reach out, and I'll be more than happy to make a trek, because I drive a lot already.
Or just to add on to that, buy it for yourself, right? Like, don't even start by trying to get it into an institution out the gate. Buy for yourself, train with it on an off season, see what it's like, and then start implementing it, right? Don't just decide to buy it at the institution level. Buy it at the individual level and see if it works for you. I mean, that's why, and again, Chad has more experience in the fact that he deals with football coaches, but I mean, I've met with coaches at the highest levels of the tactical community, Troll Subin at California. Like, we there are these people, and when they specifically wanted to try Tsunami, they didn't do it at the institution level. They bought it themselves to then run themselves through programming for it. Then they use it to train other people, right? So if you want to just do yourself a service and see what the next level or cutting edge of fitness is like, I mean, for the individual, yes, it could be a steep price, but I mean, I think what we're offering, the most comprehensive bar in the future you can get, I think that's a pretty decent price for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. So we will have your contact information in the show notes. Where can guys get started? Is on the website they can set that up, or they can order straight from the website? How does that work?
Yeah, I would email me if you have
Okay.
if you're gonna put through the contact on the setup. I'd email me. I can definitely help coach you up on what you may need, and what you're interested in. And again, granted, if you're in the Southeast, relatively, there's certain limits, but Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee,
Y'all going to be in
West
any
Virginia.
clinics? Any clinics coming up soon?
So clinic season has kind of started to wrap up a little bit. Clinics typically start for us, early in the year. We do have, I can't remember off the top of my head, kind of, if there's any clinics that we have coming up. I don't believe so. We are going to conventions. We're going to the high school convention in Texas, July 19th to 22nd. I can't remember. No, I believe it's in San Antonio. I'm not mistaken. I just know the dates.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
we're
we'll
so.
be
I mean, we just kind of ride by the seat of our pants a lot of times when we do this
sometimes.
kind of stuff. But
Yes.
I will say, if
Yes.
you guys want like a comprehensive list, chances are we're going to upload it to our website, Speed Force Max Clinics. If you just type in speedforcemaxclinics.com or clinic.com, you'll get there. There'll be like a list. Normally by this time we would have a comprehensive list of all the clinics that we're offering, but we are kind of changing up how we do clinics a little bit, especially because there might be a comprehensive book and actual certification coming out soon too.
Oh,
So we
nice.
didn't really top load the clinic side yet. But
Yeah.
if you wanted like a detailed list of stuff that's going on, that's one of the easiest ways to
Mhm.
kind of figure all that out.
Yeah. To piggyback off Byung, yeah, we are working on publishing a digital book with the certification course. So it will also offer CEUs as well. We're getting it registered at the national level for coaches that are looking to get their continuing education points as well. So it's getting flushed out. We're dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and hopefully it'll get published here by the end of the summer and get activated, and we'll start promoting it as well. And sure, we'll reach out to you guys as well as see if we can work out getting it hooked up on the podcast for you guys to help let coaches know that hey, they can learn more about the Tsunami Bar and get some CEUs as well
No
credited.
doubt.
I'll put my certification right behind me, man.
Yeah.
Tsunami
Let's
Bar. It's got
go.
to be in a plaque though. It's gonna be pretty sweet.
Let's do
So,
it.
man, we really appreciate you guys being on.
Yep.
A lot of great information. I can't wait to go back and listen to all the information. And then, but yeah, guys, if you guys are interested, man, please reach out to Chad. They do a great job. I've seen him in person in action. He does a fantastic job. If you want to bring your administrators in or ADs in, like he does a really good job of explaining and articulating the benefits, as you guys will know after listening to this podcast. But Dustin, you want to kind of close this out?
Yeah, like Byung said, get one for yourself and try it out. I know that I tried RPR by myself before I did it with anyone else to reset that CNS. Like I didn't want to come in day one with my kids. You know what I mean? Like they because funny joke there real quick. We'll close it out, man. But Mark Hoover, great dude. We met at York, and he was at Metrolina most recently, and we scrimmaged them, and they were warming up out on the field in like a samurai position doing RPR, and our kids are just looking like, what are they doing? So had to explain it to them. But guys, appreciate y'all. This was great. I every episode we do, I take nuggets and just being able to take something that we truly believe in already and add more to it. What I think our listeners are learning are we're not out here trying to just push products. Every item or thing that we have talked about on this podcast, you said it earlier, Chad, was investment. We believe in doing the work and investing in something that is truly worth it. And I can't be in alignment more with Tsunami Bar, and thanks guys. Appreciate y'all.
Yeah, appreciate y'all having us.
See you guys.
Thanks for tuning into the Coach Speak podcast. If you're interested in being a guest speaker on the show, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at coachspeakpodcast1@gmail.com. And if you have a question for our Q&A segment, don't forget to submit it through the form in the episode description. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.